In the hidden chambers of the human soul, where shadows dance and silence holds power, Carl Jung dared to journey where few were willing to go. He believed that, within the darkest parts of our psyche, what he called the shadow, there lies an untapped light, waiting not just to be discovered, but integrated. Tonight, as we explore Find Light in the Depths, Carl Jung, we are not just speaking of a psychologist or a theory. We are opening the door to an inner pilgrimage, a descent into the depths of our own being, with the hope of retrieving the gold buried beneath trauma, repression, and fear. Jung taught that to become whole, we must confront the very things we spend our lives avoiding. This lecture is not a call to escape your darkness, it is an invitation to embrace it, to find the light that can only be born in the underworld of the self. Carl Jung believed that one of the most critical components of psychological and spiritual growth was the confrontation with what he called the shadow. The shadow, as he described it, is the part of ourselves that we repress, deny, or fail to acknowledge, often because it doesn't fit within the image we want to present to the world or even to ourselves. It contains impulses, desires, memories, and traits that we've judged as unacceptable, unworthy, or shameful. These are not inherently evil or wrong parts of us. Rather, they are aspects of our human nature that we've cast into darkness because we fear them or because society has conditioned us to reject them. Yet, what Jung observed was that this act of repression does not eliminate the shadow, it only causes it to gain power in the unconscious, influencing our behavior in subtle and often destructive ways. The more we avoid the shadow, the more it governs our lives from behind the scenes. We see its manifestations in projection, when we criticize or hate others for things we can't admit in ourselves. We see it in self-sabotage, in addiction, in compulsive behaviors, in toxic relationships. The shadow is not just a philosophical idea, it is a lived reality, shaping our emotional reactions and choices every day. Jung warned that if we do not become conscious of the shadow, it will appear in our lives as fate. We'll wonder why we keep encountering the same problems, the same patterns, the same suffering, not realizing that we are being haunted by the unclaimed parts of ourselves. To confront the shadow is to begin the process of becoming whole. This is not an easy or comfortable journey. It demands radical honesty. It demands that we look at our envy, our rage, our pride, our lust, our fear, and rather than turn away from them or numb them with distraction, we learn to face them, listen to them, and integrate them. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to get rid of the shadow, but to bring it into consciousness, to allow it a seat at the table of the self without letting it dominate. This is not about indulging in darkness, but rather illuminating it. It is about recognizing that what we consider dark or wrong in ourselves may hold energy, truth, and strength we've been taught to ignore. Hidden in the shadow may be repressed creativity, passion, leadership, boundaries, intuition, or authenticity that we were once punished for expressing. The journey into the shadow is a deeply spiritual process. In many religious traditions, we are taught to avoid sin or to separate ourselves from darkness. But Jung proposed something far more courageous, that transformation does not happen by denial, but by inclusion. The parts of ourselves we fear the most may actually be the ones holding the key to our freedom. Think of the myth of the dragon guarding the treasure. In order to reach the gold, you must first face the monster. Jung saw that facing the monster within is not just psychological, it's symbolic of the hero's journey, and that hero's journey must be taken if we are to grow out of superficial personas and into authentic, conscious beings. This is not work that can be done all at once. The shadow resists exposure. It fights back. It will often disguise itself as self-righteousness or victimhood. It will try to convince us that the problem is out there in others, in the world, in systems anywhere but inside. But when we become truly committed to inner work, we stop projecting, we begin to own our darkness. We say, that anger is mine, that envy is mine, that cruelty is mine, and in doing so, we reclaim our power. We move from being passive victims of unconscious drives to active participants in our own transformation. Carl Jung also reminded us that the shadow is not only personal, it is collective. Families have shadows, cultures have shadows. Religions, governments, and entire societies are built upon disowned truths and repressed histories. As we do the personal work of confronting our own shadow, we become more capable of seeing the collective shadows around us with clarity and compassion. We stop needing scapegoats. We stop demonizing what we don't understand. Instead, we become witnesses and healers. We become people who can hold paradox, who can say, yes, I am flawed and still worthy. Yes, there is darkness, and still, there is light. This capacity to hold tension without collapsing into one extreme or another is what Jung called holding the opposites, and it is one of the most mature psychological postures we can develop. Shadow work is not the same as shame. It is not about punishing yourself for your faults. It is about deepening your self-awareness with love and patience. You are not meant to be perfect, you are meant to be whole. And wholeness includes everything: your light and your dark, your strengths and your wounds, your successes and your failures. When you acknowledge your shadow, you begin to see it not as a curse, but as an invitation. An invitation to re-enter relationship with the rejected parts of you, an invitation to heal the inner split, an invitation to stop hiding and start living in full color. When you are unaware of your shadow, it acts as a mask, distorting how you see the world and how the world sees you. You might wonder why you keep attracting the same types of people, why you keep reacting with the same emotions, or why you feel stuck in cycles of self-doubt. The answer often lies in the shadow's silent influence. The more unconscious it is, the more it controls. But the moment you begin to bring attention to it, to write about it, to talk about it, to reflect on it without judgment, you begin to loosen its grip. It may feel uncomfortable at first. It may feel like you're unraveling. But you're not falling apart, you're waking up. Jung taught that our greatest suffering often comes not from the presence of darkness, but from the effort to suppress it. When we finally stop running from it and turn toward it, we often find that what we feared was not a demon, but a wounded child, a silenced voice, a misunderstood energy. And when we extend compassion to that part of ourselves, we begin to change from the inside out. This change is not dramatic or loud, it is subtle. It is the kind of transformation that grows roots deep into the soul. It gives you a sturdiness, a calmness, a groundedness that no external success or validation can provide. It makes you real. Realness is rare in a world that thrives on performance and perfectionism. But realness is what we're ultimately craving: to be seen, to be known, to be accepted not for our image, but for our essence. And that essence includes our imperfections. When you have the courage to explore your shadow, you begin to reclaim the energy it has been holding hostage. That energy can be redirected into creation, into purpose, into love. What was once destructive becomes constructive. What once brought shame now brings wisdom. You stop splitting yourself in two. You stop hiding behind masks. You begin to live in integrity. ChatGPT said, "The process of individuation, as Carl Jung defined it, is the journey of becoming who you truly are, not who society expects you to be, not who your parents molded you into, not the persona you project to fit in or be accepted, but the authentic, integrated self that exists beneath the layers of adaptation and conformity." This journey is not linear, nor is it easy. It is a spiraling path into the core of your psyche, where you begin to peel back the layers of identity, belief, and conditioning in order to discover the original blueprint of your soul. Individuation is not about perfection, it's about wholeness. And wholeness requires you to acknowledge and integrate all parts of yourself: the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the dark, the strengths and the wounds. From the moment we are born, we are shaped by external forces: family, culture, religion, education, media. We learn who we are supposed to be in order to be loved, praised, and accepted. We form personas, masks we wear to navigate the expectations of the world. These personas are not inherently false, but they are incomplete. They are fragments of self we show to the world, while other parts soften. The most vulnerable, raw, and real parts are hidden, repressed, or denied. The more we live from the persona, the more we disconnect from the depths of our inner being. Individuation is the reverse of this process. It is the slow, deliberate work of taking off the mask, of turning inward, of listening to the voice beneath the noise. Jung saw individuation as a sacred calling. He believed that each individual has a unique path, a singular psychic fingerprint, and that fulfilling your potential is not just a personal goal, but a spiritual necessity. He spoke of the self, not the ego, but the deeper, archetypal self as the organizing principle of the psyche. The self is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, and it is always pulling you toward wholeness. It does this through dreams, synchronicities, intuition, and the mysterious pull of longing. It is what gives you the feeling that there is more to your life than the surface roles you play. The self calls you through discomfort, through breakdowns, through existential questions, and through the quiet dissatisfaction that arises when you're living out of alignment. The ego, however, resists this call. The ego wants stability, control, predictability. It is invested in the status quo, but individuation requires risk. It requires the courage to question everything you've built your identity on. It may mean walking away from systems, relationships, or identities that no longer reflect your truth. It may mean sitting in the tension of not knowing who you are while everything you once clung to falls away. Jung did not sugarcoat this process. He knew it was painful. He knew it could feel like dying. And in many ways, it is a kind of death, the death of the false self, the death of illusion, the death of egoic control. But out of that death, something new is born. Something more real, more grounded, more alive. Individuation is a process of becoming fully human. It is about owning your story, your trauma, your choices, your desires. It is about facing your shadow, not as a monster to be slain, but as a lost part of yourself to be understood and integrated. It is about reclaiming the projections you cast onto others and seeing them as mirrors reflecting the parts of you still waiting to be embraced. As you go deeper into this journey, you begin to realize that the outer world is often a reflection of your inner landscape. Healing within creates clarity without. This inner work is not selfish, it is essential. Jung believed that a world of individuated people would be a world with less projection, less conflict, less unconscious violence. When you are no longer ruled by your repressed fears and unacknowledged wounds, you stop projecting them onto others. You stop expecting others to carry the weight of your unlived life. You become responsible. You become sovereign. You begin to live from a place of inner alignment rather than external approval. You make choices that reflect your soul rather than your conditioning. You start to live from the inside out. The process of individuation is deeply personal, but it is also archetypal. It follows patterns that have existed in myth and story since the beginning of time: the call to adventure, the descent into the unknown, the confrontation with the shadow, the meeting with the inner guide, the death and rebirth of the self. Jung saw these stories not as fantasies, but as maps of the psyche. He believed that mythology was psychology in symbolic form, and that by studying these stories, we could better understand our own inner journeys. The hero's journey, the journey of the mystic, the path of the seeker, all of these are metaphors for individuation. Dreams play a vital role in this process. Jung saw dreams as messages from the unconscious, rich with symbols that can guide us toward integration. He encouraged people to record their dreams, to work with their images, to see them not as random or meaningless, but as profound communications from the deeper self. A snake in a dream might represent transformation. A house might symbolize the structure of the psyche. A storm might reflect emotional turbulence. By learning to read the language of the unconscious, you begin to form a dialogue with the parts of you that are usually hidden. This dialogue becomes a powerful tool for growth. Active imagination was another method Jung developed to support individuation. It involves consciously engaging with the images, figures, or emotions that arise from the unconscious, allowing them to express themselves through writing, drawing, or inner conversation. It is a way of bridging the gap between the conscious and unconscious mind, creating space for integration rather than suppression. Through active imagination, people have encountered guides, healed inner wounds, and accessed creativity and wisdom that were previously out of reach. It is a living connection to the inner world, a sacred space where the self can speak. Individuation is not about becoming someone else, it is about unbecoming everything you are not. It is about returning to your essence, to the person you were before the world told you who to be. But this return is not regression, it is evolution. You do not go back to the innocence of childhood, you move forward into the wisdom of maturity. You carry your history, but you are no longer defined by it. You honor your pain, but you are no longer controlled by it. You hold your contradictions with grace, no longer needing to split yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You become a whole human being, capable of holding light and shadow, joy and grief, certainty and mystery. The individuated person is not perfect, but they are real. They are not immune to suffering, but they are not ruled by it. They live with depth. They live with meaning. They live with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who they are, even when the world does not. They no longer chase validation because they are rooted in self-knowledge. They no longer run from discomfort because they have made peace with their inner complexity. They no longer seek to dominate others because they have mastered themselves. They are free not because life is easy, but because they are anchored in truth. Embracing the inner darkness to awaken light is one of the most radical and transformative principles in Carl Jung's work. He understood that darkness is not merely the opposite of light, but its necessary companion. Without darkness, there is no depth, no contrast, no context for the emergence of true light. Most people spend their lives avoiding their inner darkness, fleeing from painful emotions, hiding their insecurities, numbing their guilt and shame, denying their anger, and projecting their wounds onto others. But Jung dared to assert that only by going into the darkness can we find the treasures that are buried there. What we repress becomes the key to our liberation once we have the courage to face it. The act of embracing inner darkness is not an indulgence in pain or negativity, but a sacred turning inward, a journey of descent that leads to healing, integration, and authentic light. Inner darkness is not some distant place, it lives within us. It shows up in the stories we don't tell, in the feelings we suppress, in the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. It manifests in the inner critic, in the fear of being seen, in the shame of past mistakes, in the self-destructive habits we don't understand. It lives in trauma that was never processed, in grief that was never expressed, in anger that was never allowed. Jung believed that this darkness, which we so often resist, is actually a portal. It is through this portal that we meet the parts of ourselves that have been cast aside. These are not our enemies, they are fragments of our soul, waiting to be retrieved. They carry power, wisdom, sensitivity, passion, and creativity that were exiled in order to survive. When you begin to embrace your inner darkness, you realize that it is not something to be feared, but something to be honored. This requires a shift in consciousness, a willingness to sit with discomfort without immediately fixing or fleeing from it. Jung often referenced the alchemical process as a metaphor for inner transformation. In alchemy, base metals are transmuted into gold through fire and purification. In psychological terms, your darkness is the base material, your willingness to face it is the fire, and the gold is the transformation that occurs when you stop projecting what you feel and start listening to it. Every emotion, every memory, Every wound has something to teach you if you are willing to be still and pay attention. This is where the light begins to emerge, not from denying or conquering the darkness, but from integrating it. Integration means you allow what has been exiled to return home. It means you no longer split yourself into good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable. You begin to relate to yourself as a whole person, with contradictions and complexities that are part of your humanity. In this space of acceptance, healing becomes possible. The light that awakens is not superficial positivity. It is not pretending everything is fine. It is a deep, steady illumination that comes from seeing clearly and loving fully, including the parts of you that have been unloved. This process often begins with a breakdown, a crisis, or a deep longing that can't be ignored. Jung understood that suffering is not random. It has purpose. It is often the psyche's way of signaling that something is out of alignment, that something vital is being neglected. When the conscious life becomes too rigid or artificial, the unconscious pushes back. Symptoms appear: anxiety, depression, addictions, failed relationships, not as punishments, but as messages. They point to the need for descent, for a return to the deeper layers of the self. Jung called this the night sea journey, a mythological descent into the underworld. It is dark, uncertain, disorienting, but it is also the path to true renewal. The danger lies in resisting this descent. When we refuse to acknowledge our darkness, it gains more power. It operates in secret, influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships without our awareness. We project our unresolved pain onto others. We repeat the same patterns. We stay stuck in a shallow version of ourselves. But when we consciously engage with our darkness, we change the dynamic. We become active participants in our own evolution. We no longer live in fear of what's hidden, because we have chosen to meet it with courage and compassion. This inner work is not easy. It takes humility to admit what you've denied. It takes strength to hold space for your wounds without letting them define you. It takes faith to trust that there is meaning in your suffering, and that light can arise from it. But those who undertake this work find that something profound begins to shift. They become more grounded, more open, more compassionate, not only toward themselves, but toward others. They stop judging people for their darkness because they have met their own. They stop needing to control everything because they have learned to trust the process of transformation. In embracing the inner darkness, you also recover your power. Much of the power you lack is not gone, it is simply trapped in the places you refuse to go. Your boundaries, your voice, your intuition, your vitality, they are often hidden beneath shame, guilt, or fear. When you go into your darkness and reclaim these parts of yourself, you begin to stand in a kind of sovereignty that no external validation can give you. You become less dependent on approval, more anchored in your truth. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop abandoning yourself to belong. You become a light that is not performative, but embodied. Jung believed that true light does not come from escaping the world or transcending the body, but from fully inhabiting both. It comes from being rooted in your humanness while also being connected to the archetypal, the mythic, the sacred. It is found in the quiet wisdom that comes from walking through your own darkness and surviving it, not just surviving it, but being transformed by it. This kind of light is humble. It does not boast or shine to outshine others. It radiates naturally because it is real. It is the light of someone who knows themselves, not just the polished parts, but the broken parts too. This process also brings clarity. When you face your darkness, you begin to see more clearly what is true and what is illusion. You stop chasing the wrong things. You stop wasting energy on false identities. You begin to discern what feeds your soul and what drains it. You become more aligned with your purpose, more attuned to your inner compass. This clarity allows you to move through life with intention and integrity. You are no longer reactive, you are responsive. You are no longer fragmented, you are integrated. The world needs people who have done this work, people who are not afraid of darkness within themselves or in others. People who can hold space for complexity, for nuance, for transformation. When you embrace your inner darkness and awaken your light, you become a mirror for others. You show them what is possible. You give them permission to be real. You offer a presence that is not based on performance, but on authenticity. You walk with depth. You speak with truth. You love without conditions. You are no longer running from yourself, you are walking beside yourself, hand in hand, as one. Dreams, in the eyes of Carl Jung, are not random firings of the brain or meaningless fragments of thought. They are profound messages from the unconscious, whispers from the soul, layered in symbol, metaphor, and archetype. Jung believed that the psyche has a natural drive toward wholeness, and dreams are one of the most powerful expressions of that drive. Each dream, no matter how confusing or strange, is a carefully constructed mirror, reflecting aspects of ourselves we may not yet understand, accept, or even know exist. Dreams bypass the conscious mind's defenses. They speak a language older than logic, a language of image and emotion that draws from the deep of the collective unconscious. To take dreams seriously is to take the inner life seriously. It is to admit that there is more to us than meets the eye, and that some of the greatest insights into who we are lie beneath the surface of waking consciousness. When Jung began working with dreams, he noticed that they often contradicted the dreamer's conscious attitude. If someone thought they had everything figured out, the dream might reveal arrogance or insecurity. If someone was deeply discouraged, the dream might present an image of hope or strength. This showed him that the unconscious psyche has its own intelligence, one that compensates for the imbalances of the ego. Dreams function like inner regulators, attempting to restore equilibrium within the soul. They challenge, correct, warn, encourage, and reveal. They are not always pleasant or easy to understand, but they are always purposeful. To ignore dreams is to ignore the guidance of the deeper self. Jung developed a method of dream interpretation that emphasized personal meaning over fixed symbolism, while certain archetypal images like the shadow, the anima or animus, the wise old man, the hero appear across cultures. He believed that every dream must be interpreted within the context of the individual's life. A snake in one person's dream might symbolize fear and deception, while in another it could represent healing and transformation. What matters is the emotional resonance, the associations, the story the image tells when seen through the lens of the dreamer's inner world. This approach invites a dynamic relationship with the dream, one where the dreamer becomes an active participant in decoding its message. Recording dreams is one of the first steps toward building that relationship. Jung encouraged his patients and students to keep dream journals, to revisit their dreams over time, and to notice recurring themes, symbols, and emotional tones. Patterns often emerge: certain settings, figures, or events that repeat with slight variations, forming a kind of inner mythology unique to the individual. These recurring elements are not accidental. They are the psyche's way of pointing to unresolved conflicts, latent potentials, or emerging insights. A dream might reveal the presence of the shadow self, the repressed creative force, or the lost child within. It might show where you are stuck and where you are being invited to grow. The imagery in dreams can often be unsettling. We may encounter death, monsters, destruction, or shameful situations. Jung saw these not as negative omens, but as symbolic representations of inner transformation. Death in a dream, for instance, often signifies the end of a phase, the letting go of an old identity. Monsters might represent parts of the self that have been rejected or feared. Disasters can symbolize emotional upheaval or the breakdown of old structures. These dreams challenge us to confront what we have not yet integrated. They are not there to frighten us, but to awaken us, to pull us deeper into truth, into the complexity of the human soul. Jung also explored the concept of big dreams, those that feel particularly vivid, numinous, or meaningful. These are dreams that stay with us for years, that seem to come from a deeper place, carrying wisdom that goes beyond our current understanding. Big dreams often arrive during times of transition or crisis. They may mark turning points in the individuation process, offering symbols of new beginnings, spiritual insight, or profound transformation. To receive a big dream is to receive a message from the self, the deeper organizing principle of the psyche. These dreams can guide our decisions, change our perspective, or open us to a more expansive sense of purpose. In addition to personal dreams, Jung believed that some dreams tap into the collective unconscious, a shared psychic reservoir of human experience and archetypal imagery. In such dreams, a person may encounter ancient symbols or mythological themes that they have never consciously studied. A dream might reflect a story from Greek mythology or mirror a ritual from an indigenous culture, even if the dreamer has no conscious knowledge of these things. This phenomenon reveals the interconnectedness of the human psyche, the timeless patterns that underlie our individual lives. By studying these dreams, we begin to see that our inner journey is also part of a larger human journey, a mythic unfolding that transcends time and culture. Jung emphasized the importance of active imagination as a way to work with dream material. After recording a dream, one can revisit its images in a waking state, allowing them to unfold through imagination, dialogue, or art. You might speak to a figure from the dream, asking why they appeared or what they want to show you. You might draw the landscape of the dream or write a continuation of its story. This process deepens the connection between the conscious and unconscious mind, allowing the dream to become not just a memory, but a living portal into self-discovery. It turns the dream into a tool of transformation. Dreams also invite humility. They remind us that we do not have all the answers, that there are layers to our psyche we cannot fully control or comprehend. This is not a weakness, but a profound truth. To live in relationship with your dreams is to accept that you are both conscious and unconscious, both known and mysterious. It is to live with openness to the unexpected, to the symbolic, to the sacred. Jung did not separate psychology from spirituality. He saw the soul as the true subject of depth psychology. Dreams, in this context, are not just tools for mental health. They are expressions of the soul's longing for integration, meaning, and growth. In many traditional cultures, dreams have always been treated as sacred. They were seen as communications from ancestors, gods, or the spirit world. Jung's work bridged this ancient wisdom with modern psychology, showing that dreams are not relics of a superstitious past, but vital instruments for psychological and spiritual development. They help us access parts of ourselves that are otherwise unreachable. They speak when we are silent. They know when we are lost. They guide when we no longer trust our own direction. To ignore them is to cut off a vital source of guidance and renewal. When we begin to honor our dreams, we cultivate a deeper trust in the inner life. We start to live not just from logic and reason, but from intuition and inner knowing. We begin to recognize that the psyche is not a problem to be fixed, but a mystery to be explored. We approach our suffering with more compassion, our choices with more wisdom, and our experiences with more curiosity. Dreams become not just nighttime stories, but daily companions, gentle, insistent voices calling us back to the truth of who we are. They are maps to the soul, and every night, without fail, the soul offers us another message, another invitation, another thread to follow inward. The role of archetypes in personal transformation was central to Carl Jung's understanding of the human psyche. Archetypes, according to Jung, are not inherited ideas or fixed roles, but innate tendencies, primordial images, and universal patterns of behavior and experience that exist within the collective unconscious. They are the structural elements of the psyche, deeply embedded in all human beings, regardless of culture, language, or time period. These archetypes influence how we see the world, how we react to life's events, and how we construct meaning in our lives. They manifest in myths, dreams, religions, fairy tales, and symbols, and they arise spontaneously in moments of crisis, transition, or psychological change. Personal transformation occurs when we consciously engage with these archetypal forces and allow them to reshape our inner world. Jung identified many archetypes, each representing a different facet of human potential: the self, the shadow, the anima and animus, the hero, the mother, the trickster, the wise old man. These are just a few of the powerful psychic energies that shape our inner life and influence our development. The self is the central archetype, the totality of the psyche, the inner compass that guides the individuation process. It draws us toward wholeness, urging us to integrate all aspects of our being. The shadow is the rejected part of ourselves, the qualities we repress or deny because they conflict with our conscious identity. The shadow appears in our dreams, projections, and emotional triggers, often pointing to the very work we most need to do. The anima and animus represent the inner feminine and masculine energies, calling us toward balance and inner unity. These archetypes are not static or theoretical. They are alive within us. When we begin to recognize their presence, we initiate a dialogue with the unconscious. This dialogue brings depth, direction, and meaning to our journey of transformation. Archetypes are not external gods to be worshipped, but inner guides to be understood. When the hero archetype is activated, we may feel called to face a challenge, to leave behind comfort and confront the unknown. When the wise old man archetype arises, we may encounter deep insight or guidance in a moment of inner silence or reflection. These patterns show up not just in grand visions, but in the subtle unfolding of daily life. Personal transformation begins when we become aware of the archetypal stories we are living. Most people unconsciously act out scripts handed down by culture, family, and society. They may live according to the martyr archetype, constantly sacrificing themselves for others and suppressing their own needs. Or they may be caught in the rebel archetype, always fighting against authority without understanding what they truly believe in. These archetypes, when unconscious, can imprison us in repetitive patterns, but when we bring them into awareness, we gain the power to reshape our narrative. We begin to ask, what archetype is active in my life right now? Is it helping me grow, or keeping me stuck? What inner figure wants to emerge, and what must die for it to be born? Jung saw the journey of individuation as a series of archetypal encounters. At different stages of life, different archetypes become dominant. In youth, the hero may dominate, driving us to prove ourselves and establish identity. In midlife, the shadow becomes more apparent, demanding integration and healing. Later in life, the wise one or the self may emerge as a guiding force, leading us toward inner peace and deeper understanding. These transitions are not just psychological, they are spiritual. They represent a deepening of the soul, a movement from surface to substance, from ego to essence. Transformation happens not by rejecting these archetypes, but by entering into relationship with them. Dreams are a primary place where archetypes make themselves known. A dream of a dark forest may signal the hero's journey. A powerful, nurturing figure may represent the mother archetype. A trickster figure may appear to challenge our assumptions and provoke growth. By interpreting these symbols, we uncover layers of meaning that guide our development. Archetypes also appear in art, literature, and spiritual experiences. They speak to something ancient within us, something beyond personal memory, something universal and eternal. They remind us that our story is not ours alone, but part of a much larger tapestry of human experience. When we consciously engage with archetypes, we tap into deep reservoirs of energy and insight. This can lead to creative breakthroughs, emotional healing, and profound shifts in perspective. Archetypes help us move beyond the limitations of the ego and into a deeper, more expansive sense of identity. They invite us to step into roles we didn't know we could embody, to become the healer, the lover, the creator, the visionary. This process is not about role-playing, or imitation. It is about awakening the potentials that already exist within the psyche. It is about becoming more fully who we are. The integration of archetypes is not without its challenges. Each archetype has both light and shadow expressions. The warrior can be courageous and disciplined, or aggressive and destructive. The mother can be nurturing and life-giving, or controlling and smothering. The trickster can bring humor and perspective, or chaos and deceit. Part of personal transformation is learning to recognize these dualities and choose consciously which aspect we will embody. It is learning to see that we contain multitudes, and that our task is not to suppress parts of ourselves, but to harmonize them. This inner harmony creates authenticity, depth, and integrity. Jung emphasized that transformation is not about becoming someone else, but about becoming more truly oneself. The archetypes do not impose identities, they reveal possibilities. They show us who we could become if we are willing to listen, to feel, to grow. They connect us to the larger patterns of existence, reminding us that our struggles, joys, and breakthroughs are part of the human condition. To engage with archetypes is to participate in a sacred dance between the personal and the collective, the conscious and the unconscious, the finite and the eternal. This engagement requires patience and openness. Archetypes do not respond well to force or control. They reveal themselves when we are receptive, curious, and humble. They may come through symbols, synchronicities, or inner images that at first seem irrational or obscure, but over time, they begin to form a language, a dialogue between the surface and the depths. As we learn to speak this language, we become more attuned to the movements of the soul. We begin to see our lives not as random or chaotic, but as meaningful expressions of an inner architecture that is always guiding us toward wholeness. In the end, the role of archetypes in personal transformation is to awaken us to the fullness of who we are. They help us remember that we are not just individuals shaped by circumstance, but spiritual beings embedded in a timeless field of meaning. They offer us mirrors, maps, and metaphors for our journey. They show us the battles we must fight, the wounds we must heal, the wisdom we must claim. They call us into deeper relationship with ourselves, with others, and with the mystery of existence. They remind us that transformation is not a destination, but an unfolding process of becoming, of remembering, of returning to the center of the self where the sacred resides. The alchemy of suffering, the idea that pain can be transformed into purpose, stands as one of the most powerful insights in Carl Jung's psychological and spiritual philosophy. Jung did not view suffering as something to be eradicated or avoided at all costs. Instead, he saw it as a necessary and meaningful part of the process of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole and integrated self. Just as alchemists in the medieval world sought to transmute base metals into gold, Jung believed that the human soul engaged in a similar inner process, one in which the raw material of suffering is the very substance needed for inner transformation. In this view, our wounds are not simply burdens to carry, but doorways to a deeper understanding of who we are and what we are meant to become. Suffering has the capacity to break down the structures that no longer serve us. It disrupts the ego's illusion of control. It shatters the narratives we've built around ourselves, narratives that may be comfortable, but are often false or incomplete. When a person undergoes profound suffering through loss, trauma, illness, betrayal, or existential crisis, there is a tearing of the psychic fabric. What once held the personality together begins to unravel. For Jung, this was not the end, but the beginning of something essential. In the chaos and disintegration of identity, something deeper begins to stir. The unconscious is activated. Images, memories, dreams, and intuitions begin to emerge, offering guidance from within. These moments of crisis are opportunities for the ego to surrender its rigid control and make room for the self to emerge. Jung observed that many people come to therapy not because of symptoms alone, but because of meaninglessness. They feel that their lives lack depth or purpose. Suffering becomes the great awakener. It strips away superficiality. It demands that we go inward and ask the deeper questions. Who am I really? Why am I here? What am I meant to do with this life? These questions are not intellectual, they are spiritual. They are the soul's cry for authenticity, for alignment, for transformation. Suffering, then, is not a detour on the path, it is often the path itself. It initiates us into the deeper layers of the psyche, where purpose is not something we invent, but something we uncover. In alchemy, there is a stage known as the nigredo, or blackening. This is the phase of decomposition, where the old form dies. In psychological terms, this corresponds to depression, grief, despair, or confusion, those dark nights of the soul where everything familiar falls away. Jung insisted that this stage must not be bypassed or denied. It must be endured and consciously experienced. The nigredo is painful, but it is also sacred. It is the soil in which new life will grow. The person must sit in the ashes, feel the depth of the loss, and resist the urge to escape too quickly, for it is in this darkness that the true work of transformation begins. As the process continues, the raw material of suffering begins to be refined. In alchemy, this is the albedo, or whitening stage, where clarity and insight begin to emerge. The person starts to see the meaning behind the suffering. Patterns become visible. Lessons begin to crystallize. There is a sense of renewal, not because the pain has vanished, but because it has been integrated. What was once unbearable becomes a source of wisdom. What was once a wound becomes a place of compassion and strength. The ego, having been humbled and reshaped, begins to serve the self rather than oppose it. The personality becomes more authentic, more grounded, more capable of love and connection. Jung also spoke of the symbolic image of the wounded healer. This archetype represents the idea that those who have been wounded and have done the inner work of healing become uniquely equipped to help others. Their suffering gives them empathy, depth, and insight that cannot be learned from books or theories. They become vessels of wisdom not in spite of their wounds, but because of them. This archetype reminds us that our pain, when transformed, becomes a gift not only for ourselves, but for the world. It becomes the foundation of purpose, a source of vocation, a channel through which light can enter the lives of others. The alchemical process continues with the rubedo, or reddening, the final stage of integration and embodiment. Here, the insights gained through suffering are no longer just ideas, they become lived reality. The individual does not return to the person they were before the suffering began. They are changed, deepened, made more whole. They carry within them a sense of purpose that is not rooted in ego ambition, but in service, love, and truth. They understand that life's most difficult moments were not punishments, but initiations. They do not glorify suffering, but neither do they resent it. They honor it as the teacher it was. This process is never quick, and it is rarely linear. There are setbacks, relapses, moments of doubt and resistance, but with patience, reflection, and support, the transformation unfolds. Jung's work encourages us to become alchemists of the soul, to face our suffering not with fear, but with curiosity and reverence. To ask not just how we can get rid of the pain, but what the pain is trying to teach us. To trust that within the very thing that breaks us lies the energy that can make us whole. Suffering can open us to dimensions of the psyche that we might otherwise never touch. It can deepen our relationship to mystery, to the sacred, to the symbolic life. It can strip us of the illusions that have kept us numb and bring us into direct contact with the raw truth of existence. In this truth, there is power, there is authenticity. There is the possibility of rebirth. Jung often emphasized the importance of symbols in this process, for symbols carry the energy of transformation. A dream image, a meaningful coincidence, a powerful memory, all can become catalysts for alchemical change when we engage with them consciously. In embracing this path, we develop what Jung called a symbolic attitude and openness to the deeper meaning behind events, an ability to see beyond the literal and into the archetypal. This attitude does not deny reality, but enriches it. It allows us to move through life not as victims of fate, but as co-creators with the unconscious. It empowers us to find light in the most unexpected places, to see beauty in what once seemed broken. It teaches us that nothing is wasted, not the tears, not the failures, not even the darkest chapters. Everything can be transformed. Jung also believed that the transformation of suffering is not a solitary journey. It requires connection, whether with a therapist, a friend, a spiritual mentor, or even an inner figure that arises from the depths of the unconscious. Relationship becomes the vessel in which healing occurs. We are wounded in relationship, and we are healed in relationship. The alchemical container is not only within the psyche, but also between people. When we are truly seen in our suffering, without judgment, without fixing, we begin to see ourselves with new eyes. Compassion begins to flow. Meaning begins to emerge. The soul begins to mend. The alchemy of suffering is, at its core, the realization that life is not happening to us, but through us. That within every crisis lies an invitation, that the moments which seem to destroy us were in fact stripping away everything that was not essential, that the true gold is not found in avoiding pain, but in walking through it, with eyes wide open, heart engaged, and spirit willing to be changed. Integration over perfection is a radical shift in the way we view ourselves, our healing, and our spiritual development. Carl Jung consistently emphasized that the goal of the psychological and spiritual journey is not to become perfect, but to become whole. In a world obsessed with flawless appearances, curated lives, and idealized personas, Jung's perspective is a profound and necessary counterpoint. He proposed that true transformation happens not by eliminating our flaws, but by accepting, integrating, and harmonizing all the parts of ourselves, especially those we have rejected, denied, or disowned. Wholeness involves embracing our light and our darkness, our strengths and our vulnerabilities, our conscious choices and unconscious impulses. It means living a life rooted in authenticity, not in the illusion of perfection. Perfectionism often emerges from a deep fear of inadequacy. It masks itself as discipline or ambition, but underneath is usually the terror of being unworthy, unlovable, or unacceptable. Jung recognized this as an ego defense, a way to avoid confronting the more uncomfortable, hidden aspects of the psyche. Perfectionism can act as a wall that keeps the unconscious at bay. It tells us that if we can just be good enough, achieve enough, or fix ourselves enough, we will finally be safe. But the psyche doesn't function that way. The more we pursue the fantasy of perfection, the more fragmented we become. The shadow, the parts of ourselves that do not fit the ideal, grows stronger in its exile, and eventually, it begins to sabotage the very goals we thought would save us. Jung invites us to shift the goal from being perfect to being integrated. This means recognizing the full range of our humanity. It means owning our anger, our jealousy, our fear, our confusion, not to act them out destructively, but to acknowledge that they are part of us. Every emotion, every impulse has a voice and a message. When we silence these voices, they don't disappear, they go underground, manifesting in anxiety, depression, projection, or physical illness. But when we approach them with curiosity and compassion, we begin the process of inner reconciliation. Integration is a sacred act of inner diplomacy. It's not about letting the shadow run wild, but about bringing it into conscious dialogue. It's about asking what it needs, what it fears, what it longs for. Often, the shadow contains exactly what we need for our growth: power, creativity, passion, intuition that has been locked away because it threatened the ego's control. To live from integration is to live in alignment with the self, the deeper, wiser center of the psyche that seeks balance, not perfection. The self knows that we are made of contradictions. It understands that growth involves tension, conflict, and paradox. It welcomes the discomfort because it leads to depth. The ego wants clarity and control. The self wants truth and wholeness. The path of integration is not linear or clean. It is messy, circular, full of regressions and breakthroughs. There will be times when old wounds resurface, when shadow aspects flare up, when we fall into old patterns. But each return to the darkness is not a failure, it is part of the spiral path of growth. Each time we revisit a wound with more awareness and more compassion, we deepen the integration process. Integration also means dropping the mask. In many ways, we are trained from an early age to perform, to be who others want us to be, to fit in, to win approval, to avoid rejection. This performance becomes the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. Jung didn't condemn the persona, it serves a purpose in society, but he warned against identifying with it too strongly. When we believe we are the mask, we lose touch with our true self. We begin to believe that our value depends on maintaining the performance. Integration requires that we risk vulnerability, that we let others see us as we really are, not just the polished, successful parts, but also the messy, struggling, evolving parts. In doing so, we give ourselves the freedom to be human, and we give others permission to do the same. The spiritual dimension of integration cannot be overstated. Jung saw the psyche as inherently religious, not in the sense of dogma, but in the sense of seeking connection to something greater, something transcendent. The process of becoming whole is also a process of reconnecting to the divine within us. When we integrate the parts of ourselves we have cast out, we begin to feel a deeper sense of inner unity, a sense of sacredness in our being. We no longer see ourselves as broken pieces to be fixed, but as a living mystery to be explored. The divine, Jung believed, lives not only in the heights, but also in the depths. The self is both a psychological and a spiritual reality, guiding us toward our unique destiny through the symbols, dreams, and synchronicities of life. Relationships play a vital role in integration. Other people mirror our unconscious back to us. They trigger our wounds, evoke our defenses, and reflect our hidden selves. Every conflict, every attraction, every misunderstanding becomes an opportunity for inner work. Jung emphasized the importance of projection, how we unconsciously assign our disowned parts onto others. When we hate someone, idealize someone, or feel irrationally affected by someone, there is often a projection at play. Integration involves withdrawing those projections, recognizing that what we see in the other may be a reflection of something within ourselves. This is not about blame, it is about ownership. It is about taking responsibility for our inner world and using relationships as a mirror for growth. Dreams are also powerful tools for integration. The unconscious speaks in images, metaphors, and symbols. Jung viewed dreams not as random firings of the brain, but as messages from the deeper self. When we pay attention to our dreams, we gain insight into the parts of ourselves that are asking to be seen. A frightening dream may reveal a shadow aspect. A recurring symbol may point to an unfulfilled potential. Engaging with dreams through journaling, reflection, or dialogue allows us to bring these hidden dimensions into consciousness. Over time, this dream work strengthens the connection between the ego and the self, deepening our inner unity. Living a life of integration means accepting that wholeness is a dynamic and lifelong process. There is no final arrival point, no state of being where everything is perfectly aligned and all wounds are healed. Rather, it is a continual dance between light and shadow, between the known and the unknown. It requires humility, the willingness to admit we don't have all the answers. It requires courage, the strength to face our inner world without flinching. It requires grace, the ability to forgive ourselves for being works in progress. Integration doesn't promise an easy life, but it offers a meaningful one, a life where we are not enslaved by perfectionism, not haunted by shame, not fragmented by denial. A life where we are grounded, present, real. where we can meet each moment with openness and depth, knowing that every experience, every emotion, every part of ourselves belongs. This is the heart of Jung's message that our task is not to become something else, but to become more fully ourselves, that every part of us has a place at the table, that our imperfections are not flaws to be hidden, but threads in the tapestry of our unique soul. That healing is not about fixing what is broken, but about remembering what is whole, that in the end, it is not perfection that makes us human, but the courageous choice to live in truth, to love without masks, and to walk the path of integration, wherever it may lead.